A rusted mining station wakes as a fallen geologist lands for the first time in years. A bronze-eyed drake watches from the ridge, guarding a secret that could clear his name or end his life. In the next minutes, sealed doors, a final message, and one choice ignite a battle for truth. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video, and tell us where are you watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. The shuttle came down in rattles and sighs, like an old instrument trying to remember a song. Nate Rosen held the controls with steady hands, but inside, he felt that wobble he tried to hide from himself. Ahead lay Iron Vale Station, a rust-brown smear tucked into jagged ridges, its towers and cranes jutting from the rock like broken ribs. The sun here slipped low with a tired glow, casting long shadows that made the place look older than time. Nate had not been back to a real mine in years. Once upon a younger season, he had memorized fault lines the way others memorize poems. People called him a prodigy. Then, the Hollow-Seam disaster happened. 23 lives were gone. The inquiry said the beams failed because Nate missed a pressure number that should never be missed. Since then, silence had followed him like a second shadow. The landing gear grated against the cracked pad and held. He powered the shuttle down and sat still, listening to the engines tick as they cooled, the way a kettle clicks when it gives up the boil. His mentor's name walked through his mind again, Professor Selwyn Clark. Clark's message had been short, formal, and full of ghosts. The station is yours. There are matters that need you. The codes are enclosed. The airlock hissed open. Heat slipped in with dust that tasted like old batteries. Nate stepped out and squinted at the weight of the light. Iron Vale looked empty at first, but it carried the small clues of a place that had not given up. A panel blinked low. A door had newer scratches in its paint. A cable lay coiled as if set down yesterday by patient hands. Something shifted on the ridge above. Nate looked up and forgot to breathe. There, still as carved metal, crouched a drake the locals called a sky lizard, though that word was too simple for the creature's living presence. Its scales bore the colors of late fire, bronze at the edges and ember orange along the spine. Its eyes, gold and deep, watched him with a focus that felt almost like a greeting. Nate did not have a gun. He had a name, some memories, and a letter folded in his pocket until it softened at the creases. The drake opened its wings and tested the air as if measuring a thought. It lifted, glided down with calm control, and landed atop the main processing hall. Talons touching the old steel gently, like a musician placing fingers on strings. A console beside the heavy door chirped awake, blue lines forming a timid halo. The words wavered in the dusty air. Voice print identification required. Nate stepped closer, aware of the drake's gaze resting on him like warm sunlight. He cleared his throat, and the sound startled him. "Nathan Rosen," he said. The system fought for a heartbeat. "Welcome back, Nathan Rosen." A message from Professor Selwyn Clark will now play. The projection rose into a pale, grainy face Nate knew well, a face lined by wind and late nights and stubborn hope. Clark spoke softly, as if a door were open nearby and someone might listen. "Nate, if you are hearing this, it means time has finally caught me. I know we left things broken between us. I owe you the truth, and I should have given it sooner. Iron Vale is yours now, along with everything in it. You will find a guardian here who will recognize you." The image tilted upward, and for a second, Clark's eyes brightened. "Follow the drake. Trust what we built. It will show you where the truth is hidden." The message blinked out, leaving the station sounds, the thin wind, a creak, a far-off settle of rock. Nate looked up. The drake had lowered its head as if to endorse every word. It slid down from the roof with smooth grace and padded toward a shadowed entry, pausing to see if he would come. "All right," Nate said to the air, or to the creature, or to his own doubt. Show. Inside, Iron Veil held a second life under its rust. Corridors that smelled of metal and old rain led to rooms that wore dust like a coat, but kept their shape. A cup sat by a monitor, a ring of tea dried like a moon. There was a path through the dust where someone had walked again and again with careful feet. The drake guided him into a freight lift whose walls remembered dents from heavy cargo. The lift hummed and carried them down. When the doors opened, a plain wall faced them. The drake pressed its snout to a small square, and a red light became green. The wall slid and revealed a chamber so clean that Nate almost laughed from the shock of it. Glass shone, instruments hummed with polite power, maps danced in the air, layers of geology drawn like close-held secrets. The drake stepped onto a circular platform at the center and looked back with a patient tilt of its head. Nate joined it. Soft light circled them, and the room bloomed into a full dome of data. Surveys, models, fragments of video, recorded calls, numbers that meant strength and time and depth. The band around the drake's neck lit with a small silver glow. A voice emerged, smooth yet touched with a gentle grain. "Welcome, Nathan Rosen," it said. "My name is Embercrest." The drake's gold eyes held steady. "Professor Clark asked me to keep the truth safe until you arrived." The platform hummed under Nate's boots, as if the earth itself steadied him. Somewhere deep inside, a door he had locked long ago shifted on its hinges. The translator band carried Embercrest's speech like a bridge between two shores. "Please, look here," the drake said, and a model of Holocene rose in luminous lines, the shafts and supports laid out like the bones of a cathedral under stone. Nate reached out, and the model responded to his hand as if it understood the language of intent. He had always loved this kind of map, the way rock reveals itself when you ask the right questions. But the love had grown cautious after the tragedy, like a flame cupped against wind. "The inquiry blamed my numbers," Nate said quietly. "The tolerances. I was sure I checked them, again and again." "You did," Embercrest replied. "The collapse was guided by design, not by error." With a gesture, the drake called up images of the support beams, magnified until their inner patterns came into view. Small points on the lattice darkened and disappeared in an even rhythm, like a song made of missing notes. "Micro-scale disassemblers," the voice explained. "They ate the metal at precise intervals to create failure once a certain depth was reached." Nate's breath caught. Even after all those years, watching the proof awaken felt like an avalanche in his chest. Who would do that? He asked, and he knew the answer was a name he did not want to hear. More layers appeared, encrypted messages, shipments misnamed to avoid attention. Invoices padded and snipped until they meant nothing if you glanced only once. A face came up at last, well-dressed and calm. The kind of calm that is bought. The text beneath read, "Marcus DeVere, Operations Aurum Reach Consortium." The band's voice stayed even. DeVere arranged the sabotage to mask secret extraction of luminite, a prohibited element. Its energy yield is high, and its hazards higher. Your mentor found traces of luminite below Holocene months before the disaster. He warned the board. The board listened with polite faces and then moved forward with a different plan. More files slid into place, test results, buried memos, a schedule that matched the collapse to a cleanup window when unmarked crews arrived. Their scanners tuned to a signal they should never have known. Luminite shimmered on a spectral graph like a storm inside a gemstone. Clark tried to go through official channels, Embercrest said. Records vanished. People who promised help discovered they had new bosses. Some became quiet in sudden ways. Clark realized Ironvale would need to become two places at once, a ruin on the surface, a home for truth below. Nate studied the timelines, the slow, patient building of a safe relay web hinged to old satellites no one watched anymore. The professor's handwriting appeared in notes, even and clear, always ending with small circles like soft endings to hard sentences. At the center sat a sequence that did nothing until it held both the evidence and Nate's confirmation. The final locks waited for his hand. "You kept this hidden all this time," Nate said. It came out as awe and grief, both. "How did you keep going?" "I promised," Embercrest said simply. "And I understood what the mining did to my kind when rules were ignored. Luminite dust sours water and thins eggshells. The nests fail in seasons after the digging. We learn fast when our young grow weaker." Nate looked at the Drake, and for a moment the station fell away. This was not just human sorrow. It was shared harm, spread across species and seasons. "If I activate the sequence," he said, "what happens next?" "The evidence will route through secure channels to independent regulators beyond Aurum Reach influence. Journalists in 3 systems will receive complete packages. Data will also go to a circle of citizen investigators with strong reach. From the first send to a public story, we estimate 5 days, if undisturbed. And if disturbed, they will come here to quiet us," Embercrest said. The band's voice did not tremble. "Clark built protections. They reduce harm. They do not invite it." Nate stood very still. He thought of the 23, of morning shifts that begin with coffee and end with ash, of the look on a supervisor's face when the ground shakes once, then again, then becomes a long, slow terror. He thought of Clark and their last talk, heated and proud. He thought of the boy he had been, who believed the rock would always tell the truth if you listened closely enough. "What if I say no?" he asked at last. "Then I keep waiting," Embercrest said, "for you or for no one. But I have waited a long time already, and the young do not have more seasons to spare." The station hummed, a quiet pulse that felt like breath. Nate looked down at his hands. They had built machines and carried boxes and held onto railings that swayed. They could hold this too. He stepped to the console that asked for him and placed his palm on the scanner. The panel warmed. "Nathan Rosen," he said, and his voice did not shake. "Authorized transmission." The system acknowledged with a soft tone, as if it too understood the weight of chosen action. Lights turned from amber to green. Outside, the wind made a small sound against a vent and moved on, like a witness deciding to stay and see what comes next. "It begins," Embercrest said. "Then we get ready," Nate replied. The platform dimmed to working light. Embercrest led Nate through Ironvale's quieter corridors, opening rooms that had hidden themselves in plain sight. Reinforced doors set into stone, a narrow passage where sound died, a chamber full of models that showed every path through the rock, like veins in a living body. The plan was no longer an idea. It had valves, timers, and safeguards. It had intention shaped into simple steps. They had one more thing too, a hope that did not feel like a trick. Dawn came thin and quick. The first alarm chimed while Nate was securing a relay trunk with his knees on the floor, and his hands deep in braided cable. Embercrest lifted his head, as if hearing a far bell through stone. The screens woke, sketching 3 convoy lines, moving across the broken flats from the northwest. "They are early," Nate said. "Someone listened in," Embercrest replied. Clark gave that a 9 in 10 chance. Armored transports rolled toward the main gate, their turbines kicking pale dust into unkind spirals. Above them, a pair of gunships dented the sky. Aram Reach logos ran along their sides like signatures scrawled in a hurry. "We cannot meet them in the open," Nate said. "We will meet them in the place Clark designed," Embercrest said. The Drake's band brightened. "Please follow to emergency command." They took a back run of tunnels, the kind you crawl through when you need the rock to guard your back. The command room sat inside the mountain, a small fortress with walls that looked like night. Displays showed Iron Veil from every angle, roofs, yards, the ridge lines that curved like quiet waves. The convoy reached a gate and spilled people who moved like trained answers to the same question. At their center walked Marcus DeVere. Even from a distance, his posture carried the easy weight of someone who believes the door will always open. A channel requested attention. DeVere's voice had the tone of a man placing cards in a neat line. He offered money and exit, and a promise that felt like smoke. Nate listened, then spoke with a dry clarity he did not know he had kept. He told DeVere no. He told him the evidence was already moving. DeVere's reply slid from charm to threat like a coin flipping in slow air. The channel cut. Silence settled. One of those deep ones that comes before a storm decides what to do with itself. "Activate Defense Pattern 1, Embercrest said. Nate keyed it in. Iron Veil changed its shape. Simple panels separated to reveal quiet turrets that looked outward with patient rules written into their circuits. Stop the shot, not the shooter. Nets unrolled in hidden trenches. The ridges stirred. Drakes rose from caves that had kept their scents like old stories. Some were small, their wings quick as ideas. Some were broad and slow, meant to outlast wind. They took positions as natural as breath, and the air around the station gained a pulse like a living drum. A shadow larger than the rest peeled itself from the crag and stretched. Nate stared. How big? Older than the records, Embercrest said. We call that one Granite Wing. He remembers storms that bent forests flat. The gunships pushed lower. Granite Wing climbed to meet them, enormous and precise. He struck with timing, not rage. Wingtip along a rotor seam, talon across a sensor array. The ships hiccuped and spun toward forced landings. Crews rattled but unhurt. On the ground, the other drakes narrowed the circle around the transports. Gusts and roars, sending dust sheets that nudged the security line inward like a tide that knows its beach. Devereaux will try to reach his higher friends, Nate said. We have to cut that option. Already done, Embercrest said. Local comms are a closed pond now. Nate nodded. Then we move while the circle holds. They traced a path on the screens to a hatch near the landing yard that once served as a maintenance outflow. From there, 20 silent meters of open ground to the vehicles where Devereaux stood, headset crooked as if he could bully a signal from blank air. They crawled through the narrow chute, boots whispering over old dust. The hatch opened to a strip of shadow under a service brace. Outside, the world smelled like sun on iron and the sharp scent of Drake musk that marked a boundary the way a fence marks a field. Stay behind me, Embercrest said. Your part is the words. Words and the very old cutter, Nate said, holding the handle of an industrial laser that Clark had kept oiled in a tidy drawer. He might not know it can still sing. They moved, angles and pauses, the way you cross a stream on careful stones. The drake's bulk created a false hill between Nate and the rest of the yard. They reached a stalled transport. Beyond it, DeVere stood with his back half-turned, speaking to nobody now, his voice thin against nothing. Nate stepped out and aimed the cutter. "Marcus," he said, "don't." DeVere spun. For a second, surprise stripped his face down to bone truth. Then the old poise returned. "You won't fire that," he said gently. "You never were a man for drama." "You misread me," Nate said. Again. DeVere's hand dipped toward his jacket. Embercrest moved in a single smooth line. Tail struck wrist, weapon clattered to the ground, and a wing pushed Nate back as a shield. In the same motion, the drake set a heavy foreclaw on the transport, pinning DeVere without breaking anything. The band's voice came warm and steady. "Please be still," it said. "The day can end more softly if you choose." The fight left DeVere's shoulders. Not dignity, that stayed for a time, but the kind of belief that thinks it can unmake truth with a phone call. He nodded once, a small bow to a larger shape. The rest of the standoff took its time folding. Security teams, shaken by circling wings and a sky that now belonged to old creatures and older rules, stacked their weapons and sat, palms open on their knees. Ironvale watched and held like a cliff that decides not to fall. In the command room later, they secured DeVere with padded restraints and recorded a plain statement of events. Nate stood behind him and spoke the time and place, voice clear. Embercrest stood beside him, slow breath steady as a metronome. Outside, Granite Wing settled again on his ledge and closed one eye, like someone saving a bookmark. "How long until the first wave of stories?" Nate asked. "Less than 7 hours," Embercrest said. "Then waves after that. Then we keep watch." "We keep watch," Embercrest agreed. They waited, and the mountain held their quiet. News does not so much break as arrive in widening rings. It started with a cautious report from an independent feed that valued documents over statements. Then a regulator in another system announced a sudden review with uncommon speed. By nightfall, several networks ran long segments that paired Clark's files with interviews from crews who remembered odd orders and odd silences. Arrests followed in a slow, steady sequence, like a line of lamps blooming down a long street. Marcus DeVere left Ironvale with a formal escort, his lawyer already calling everything a misunderstanding. Records told a different story, and they told it often. When the official investigators reached Ironvale, they found a station that looked wrecked at the edges and tidy at the heart. They walked the clean lab under the mountain. They saw the tiny bite marks in broken metal. They traced payments across fronts that dissolved like sugar in tea. They spoke to Nate with respect that made him feel both grateful and a little lost. Embercrest kept to the higher bays while officials worked, stepping forward only when asked, each answer measured and patient. The investigators learned that the Drakes were not rumors and not pets, but partners, ready to be recognized for what they had always been, thinking, choosing, able to hold a plan and a memory at once. In the weeks that followed, regulators placed Luminite under deeper guard. Independent observers were stationed at sites that had once reported only to themselves. Arum Reach changed shape, the way a house looks different after the wind removes one side. Still standing, but every room aware of the weather. A web of names appeared and untangled into courtrooms. Ironvale, meanwhile, began to breathe in a new rhythm. Nate used the compensation he received and what remained of Clark's private funds to rewrite the station's purpose. They removed old signage that smelled of failure and raised a modest plate that read, The Clark Institute for Earth and Sky. People called it CIES first, then simplified it to Earth and Sky when they forgot who needed initials. Human crews arrived with steady boots and good questions. Drakes arrived by wing, shadows crossing the yard like pages turning. Together, they tested methods that did not harm nests or sour streams. They designed gentle bores, timed blasts to seasons, shared flight path maps with wind data and thermal pockets annotated by Drake senses. The work felt like a long broken song, finding its next ver. Granite Wing visited sometimes, settling on his ledge like a mountain growing a second shoulder. Young Drake circled him, and he told them stories in low notes that the translator could not quite catch. Perhaps some things stay in one language, and should. Nate walked through it all with a quiet gladness that did not need to shout. Shame is heavy, and when it lifts, it does not fly away fast. It rises like mist when morning gives it leave. He spoke often with families of the 23. He did not try to repair what cannot be repaired. He listened, answered questions, and made sure their names sat in the main hall where light would find them every day. 1 year from the day the shuttle rattled down onto the cracked pad, the station hummed with a new kind of busy. The yard had less dust and more purpose. A pair of young Drakes played tug with a length of rope, while a mechanic pretended not to notice and smiled into his sleeve. Bite. A teacher from a nearby settlement led students along a marked path and told them that the ground keeps secrets, but it also keeps promises if you treat it kindly. Nate stood on the observation deck and took in the layered sounds. A crane's soft beep, the whoosh of wings, a kettle clicking off in the break room. Embercrest landed beside him and folded into a comfortable shape. Thinking again? The Drake asked. I try not to overdo it, Nate said. Some days I succeed. The Eastern Survey lit up this morning, Embercrest said. The readings look like a polite invitation. Nate grinned, small and real. Polite invitations deserve company. They took the side path down to the new tunnel, a clean passage cut with respect for the rock's wishes. Lanterns cast warm circles that made the walls look like old wood. The air was cool but kind to the lungs. I was wrong about many things, Nate said after a while. I thought the ground cared about skill more than care. Now, I think it is the other way around. Both matter, Embercrest replied, but care chooses where skill should go. At the tunnel's end, instruments waited like patient dogs. They ran a pass together, Nate watching the lines grow on the tablet, while Embercrest smelled the earth in that way Drakes do, which is to say, with memory and direction both. The readings showed a vein worth studying, not for its quick shine, but for the way it could be harvested without bruising the layers around it. Nate marked it as a future sight. He no longer rushed. He put dates next to thoughts, like seeds next to rows. On their way back, they paused where the passage widened into a small cavern. Above them, minerals made a soft glow, like distant city lights under a thin fog. Embercrest looked up with a contentment that felt like music. Selwyn would have liked this, Nate said. He would have complained about meetings, Embercrest said, amused. Then he would have stayed late to check the calibrations twice, and leave notes with round dots at the ends, Nate added. They stood in the pale light for a few breaths. A good place can be quiet without being empty. We should head back, Nate said. There is a group from the Valley School arriving. They will ask bright questions and we will try to keep up. We usually fail and learn something, Embercrest said. Our best pattern, Nate agreed. They reached the deck as the sun began its long, gentle slide. The yard below looked like a living map of choices made with care. People waved, wings tilted. Somewhere, a kettle clicked on again because good work needs tea. Nate rested his hands on the railing and felt the metal warm under his palms. For a moment, the past folded into the present without tearing. He thought of the old saying Clark used when a sample surprised him. Not all treasure shines when you find it.